1 minute ago, Diddy peed his pants. As Monique names Oprah, Tyler Perry. Secret sex and NDAs burned. Day 6 of the Diddy trial had the same electricity in the air as every day before, yet only this time the current had teeth. Reporters jostled in the corridors of the federal courthouse. Whispered theories, half-truths, and speculation passed between news crews like contraband. Everyone was waiting for something. What exactly they couldn't name. But when a quiet storm named Monique entered through a side entrance, unlisted, unannounced, unflinching, they knew. The name alone turned heads. The actress, the comedian, the outcast, the woman who said too much too early. Today she would speak again, but this time under oath. The stakes, not just Diddy, not just a trial, but Hollywood's very machinery of silence. The moment she stepped into the courtroom, the energy shifted. Diddy, in a charcoal suit that clung too tightly to his composure, leaned in close to his lawyer. A whisper, a twitch, a jaw that clenched too late to hide. Monique took the stand. No cameras, no flashes. Just sketch artists scrambling, jurors leaning forward, and a judge silently gripping his gavel. "I was asked here to speak the truth," she said, voice firm but not hostile. "And that's what I intend to do." The gallery held its collective breath. She began with context. Years of warning the public. Years of being told she was bitter, ungrateful, delusional. Years of being iced out for refusing to play the game. But today, Monique had brought timelines, names, transcripts, a story no longer told in sound bites, but backed by facts. She spoke of meetings, phone calls, promises broken in boardrooms where deals were whispered over champagne and NDAs. She presented a timeline handed to the judge in advance, mapping her history with Diddy, with Tyler Perry, with Oprah Winfrey. And suddenly this wasn't about one man anymore. It was about a pattern. Monique paused before naming names, but when she did, she didn't flinch. "In 2018, I had a private phone call with Tyler Perry," she told the court. "He admitted I was blackballed, admitted it was wrong. I promised to apologize." She looked toward the jury, not a flicker of anger in her voice, just the truth. He never did. What followed wasn't conjecture, it was evidence. Monique presented a written transcript the court would later authenticate, in which Perry says, "If I apologize publicly, it'll blow back on people who aren't ready to be exposed." Who was he referring to? A prosecutor asked. Monique didn't blink. "Puff, that's who. Puff Daddy, Diddy, whatever name he wants to use that day." Gasps. The courtroom stirred. Even the prosecution team glanced at each other. Speculation had now become testimony, and the evidence mounting, she continued. The quote from Perry was damning enough, but what came next chilled the room. Monique revealed a recorded phone call in which Perry said, "There are things going on at Puff's parties that we're not supposed to talk about." The judge allowed the transcript, the audio still pending, but that moment changed the shape of the case. The Diddy trial had begun as a linear prosecution. Monique had just cracked it open like a trap door. What had once been whispers about parties and luxury penthouses were now part of an official record. Monique's voice didn't shake, it didn't rise, but it pierced. "In 2006, I attended a private party in the Hollywood Hills. I was invited by a fellow actor, told it was networking gold." She described a candlelit home, phones taken at the door, rooms that pulsed with music incense and soft R&B. There were women in heels, men in robes, and an assistant of Diddy's who said, "You're safe here, if you sign the NDA." She didn't. She left. The silence that followed that sentence filled the courtroom like a siren. From that moment, she said, the calls stopped. The invites vanished. She was labeled difficult, dangerous, not worth the risk. I always suspected why, now I know. Her story mirrored Cassie Ventura's earlier account. Only this time, the witness wasn't vulnerable. She was established, respected, and she had nothing left to lose. "Do you believe Mr. Perry protected Diddy's image?" the prosecution asked. "Yes," she replied. Monique pointed the jury toward a very public moment, one many saw as generous. Tyler Perry donating $1 million to Bishop T.D. Jakes' megachurch. "People called it charity. I saw it as damage control." She described how weeks after that donation rumors about Diddy began disappearing from gossip blogs. She cited examples, screenshots. And then she dropped the second bombshell. "I received an email chain from a PR rep accidentally forwarded to me. The subject line included my name, Puff's name, and Tyler's. The content, how to manage optics." The judge reviewed the redacted version. The courtroom held its breath again. This wasn't paranoia. It was a PR strategy, cold, corporate, coordinated, and it included a list. "There is a list in Hollywood," Monique said quietly. "Not written down, but everyone knows it." She described the untouchables, the names you don't speak against, the people who shape careers or end them. Puff, Tyler, Oprah. Their silence wasn't passive, it was protection. "I landed on the other side of that line in 2010, and I've been climbing back since." She cited actors who vanished after one breakout role, talents labeled difficult or unmarketable. Some didn't play the game, some saw things. The gallery had stopped taking notes. Everyone was just watching now. The judge reminded the jury that these were allegations, but the message was clear. Hollywood wasn't protecting art, it was protecting secrets. "Do you believe Diddy played a role in sabotaging your career?" came the final question. "Not at first," Monique said, "but eventually yes." She spoke of a call from a junior exec at Revolt TV who told her she had become an obstacle. They needed access to Puff's platforms, and I was in the way. Emails surfaced, real ones, discussing how to control the narrative around Monique and Cassie Ventura. Words like optics, containment, narrative alignment. "I wasn't blackballed," she said, staring down the courtroom. "I was whiteballed by people who looked like me." Then she added one final line. "I have the audio, Tyler apologizing, saying he was wrong, but he wouldn't go public, said it would ruin everything." The judge allowed the transcript. The gallery froze. This wasn't just testimony. This was history. The courtroom reconvened after a short recess. Stillness hung in the air. And then Monique spoke again. "Now let's talk about the list." That single sentence reset the tension in the room. Attorneys froze mid-note. Jurors straightened. The prosecution leaned in. "There is a list in Hollywood, not written down, not documented, but everyone knows it exists. It's the list of people you don't speak against. The untouchables." She named them without ceremony. Puff, Tyler, Oprah. That list, it doesn't blacklist you, it erases you. She recounted her career after 2010, offers that vanished, film festivals that stopped calling, directors who off-record said her name couldn't be attached to funding. She mentioned actors who got one breakout role, then disappeared. Some said no, some saw things, some asked questions, and like me they paid. She paused. And some didn't survive it. She read from a redacted statement submitted through legal channels by a former actor. The person described a retreat hosted by a major filmmaker where contracts were signed in advance, phones taken, and rituals conducted. "I'm not naming that filmmaker," Monique said. "I don't need to," her tone sharpened. "This isn't about one man. It's about a machine, a silence machine." She talked about NDAs, about crises managed by the same PR firms, about handlers shared between icons, and then she did what few dared. She is named Oprah Winfrey. "In 2010, I told Oprah something personal, that I'd been abused by my brother as a child. She promised she'd never exploit that, and then she put him on her show." The courtroom seemed to forget to breathe. "She aired it after I turned down the Precious Press tour, and when I asked why, she said it was business." Monique continued connecting Oprah Perry and Diddy through handlers, lawyers, and PR firms. The same firm that had forwarded her the now infamous email chain. The same one is now coordinating narratives for clients in this very trial. Careers were built or buried based on compliance. That's not paranoia, that's logistics. She opened a new binder. This, she said, is the call log. She held up a page. These are the calls made from Perry's team to Diddy's staff before that revolt meeting. The courtroom erupted, not in volume, but in vibration. The defense objected. The judge reviewed. And then he admitted it into evidence. Do you believe you were intentionally discredited to protect future partnerships between Perry and Diddy? The prosecution asked. Yes. Do you believe that what happened to you is still happening to others? Yes. Then came the third blow. I wasn't blackballed, I was whiteballed, by black people. People who feared losing their own spot more than they cared about doing right. Gasps. One juror dropped their pen. The judge didn't interrupt. What they did to me, what they did to Cassie, what they're doing to young people right now, it won't stop unless someone says it out loud. She said she initially declined to testify, that she didn't want to reopen trauma, endanger her family, or relive it. But then I saw the footage. I saw Cassie break down. I saw Diddy shouting. And I heard my grandmother's voice, "Baby, don't let them write your story without you in the room." She recounted her decision as a moment of clarity, not revenge, not bitterness, a duty. The prosecutor's final question, in your opinion, what is the root cause of this entire system of silence? Monique looked straight at Diddy. Fear. Fear of losing jobs, of losing power, of losing relevance. She turned to the jury, and fear of telling the truth, because people like Puff, like Tyler, and yes, like Oprah, have made it very expensive to do so. She took a breath. You thought no one would talk, she said to Diddy, that you built an empire strong enough to silence everybody. But now you're sitting in silence, and I hope you finally hear us. As she stepped down from the witness stand, the courtroom did not erupt. It absorbed, it shifted, because Monique, blackballed for over a decade, had just become the most powerful voice in the trial. The moment she locked eyes with the defense and quietly spoke the name Tyler Perry, the narrative changed, not with a scream, but with precision. You want to talk about power. Ask him why I was blackballed after refusing to work for free. Ask who stood beside him at every event after. The room frozen, she raised a folder. I know who was at the parties. I know who signed the NDAs. I was there when they were passed around. I was told not to speak, and when I did, my work dried up. Her voice lowered. Be grateful, they said. You're lucky to be here. She paused. I have audio, Tyler apologizing. He admitted he was wrong, but he refused to go public. Said it would ruin everything. She looked forward. I'm done protecting men who never protected me. And just like that, the trial wasn't about Diddy anymore. It was about everyone who kept him untouchable. Reporters outside the courthouse didn't know what had happened. They couldn't. Cameras were still banned. But word traveled like electricity. Monique had detonated a truth bomb, and the aftershocks were everywhere. That evening, news tickers ran phrases like surprise testimony Hollywood's, secret network, and power players named. It wasn't clickbait. It was courtroom verified. Monique's name shot up on social platforms, outpacing Diddy himself. Hashtags emerged. Yar, the list is real. Monique's dit. Yeah, Hollywood silence. But inside the courthouse, Day 7 began, not with spectacle, but stillness. Jurors walked in like they'd read something between the lines of their notes overnight. The judge entered more cautiously. Diddy's team grim-faced. They knew yesterday hadn't just changed public opinion, it had shifted judicial posture. The prosecution opened the morning with a simple but deadly exhibit, the email chain Monique had referenced. Unredacted, verified. In it, PR reps from a firm hired by both Tyler Perry Studios and Revolt TV discussed how to soften the edges of public sentiment surrounding Cassie Ventura's suit and manage residual Monique hostility. The defense objected. The judge, after a long pause, overruled them. He used the word relevant 3 times in one ruling. The tone had officially changed. Then came the quietest nuclear strike of the trial. Monique had mentioned a phone call, a private apology from Tyler Perry. That audio had now been reviewed. The judge admitted a partial transcript. The courtroom held still as the prosecution read the first lines aloud. "I know I messed up. You weren't difficult. You just refused to work for free. I should have said that. I didn't." Then the pivot. "But I can't go public. Puff's name is too deep in this." The moment that final sentence echoed through the courtroom, every narrative Monique had built came crashing down, not into rubble, but into place. It wasn't a theory. It was architecture. And then something rare. The judge asked for a 10-minute recess. He needed a moment. The gallery didn't buzz. It pulsed. Journalists raced to bathrooms and benches, calling editors, whispering to colleagues, already knowing this would become a headline that transcended entertainment. This was institutional. When the court resumed, the prosecution called a digital forensics expert. He verified the metadata on the audio file. Time-stamped. Authentic. Recorded with legal consent. The defense's only argument was character. "She's bitter," they said. "She's dramatic." Monique didn't flinch. She just watched. It wasn't her turn anymore. She had already told the truth. The next witness was less known, a former PR contractor. She appeared nervous, unassuming, but her testimony carried weight. "I handled 3 crisis narratives for high-profile clients in 2017, she said. 2 of them involved covering up rumors around private events hosted by Mr. Combs. The third discrediting a story about Monique being blackballed. I was instructed to plant counter-narratives on entertainment blogs. I did." "How were you instructed to do that?" the prosecutor asked. "Email, text, Slack channels. We used burner Twitter accounts. We fed copies to blog writers. We made it seem organic." "What was the strategy?" "Reframe her as unstable, difficult, bitter. Claim she wanted money. Undermine her credibility. Distract from the timeline. And who signed off on the campaign?" The witness pulled out an invoice. "Perry's studio, Revolt. Same account rep. Shared campaign code." "Did you know about the call logs?" "I didn't, but I'm not surprised." The judge leaned forward. "Are you saying these weren't isolated decisions?" "No, Your Honor. This was coordinated, across entities." Monique looked down, a flicker of exhaustion on her face, but the room awakened. Now it wasn't just her story. It was a blueprint. After the PR contractor's testimony, the court went into a sealed session, a debate over new exhibits. But by the time lunch break arrived, everyone knew this trial wasn't about a party. It was about a system, about who built it, who guarded it, and who finally had the courage to pull the curtain back. Outside, rain had started to fall lightly, as if the city itself was exhaling. Monique didn't speak to reporters. She didn't have to. Her silence finally had been heard. Outside the courthouse, the mood had shifted. News anchors fumbled between legal analysis and cultural commentary. Panels of pundits debated whether Monique had overstepped or finally said what others couldn't. But the consensus was clear: something real had cracked. Industry voices began to weigh in, some subtly, others definitely. An anonymous showrunner posted, "I worked with Monique in 2011. Not difficult, just wouldn't lie." A veteran costume designer tweeted, "There is a list. Trust me. It doesn't need ink." Even a few mid-tier actors cautiously echoed support, each tweet a crack in the dam. But behind the scenes, panic. Talent agencies quietly combed through old NDAs. Legal teams prepared crisis playbooks. Studios placed internal calls. No one wanted to be next. In court, Diddy's defense team recalibrated. Their strategy had shifted from rebuttal to survival. They called a witness of their own, a former entertainment executive, calm, composed, well-dressed. What can you tell us about Ms. Monique? The witness hesitated. She was uncompromising, intense, not easy to manage. Is that unusual in the industry? A pause. No, but she didn't make people feel safe. She asked too many questions. And is that a problem? The executive adjusted his tie. It is if your job is to keep the machine running. Unintentionally, he had said the quiet part out loud. The prosecution leaned into that. You mentioned the machine. What is that? The witness sighed. It's how the industry protects its own, protects revenue, protects image, sometimes at the cost of individuals. It's not personal, it's structural. The words hung heavy. Then came a crucial pivot. The prosecution introduced flight logs, guest lists, a sequence of names, executives, actors, influencers, linked to events described by previous witnesses. One list included Monique, one did not. But in both, the names of the untouchables floated near the top. Did you ever attend an event hosted by Mr. Combs? The prosecution asked the executive. He looked down. Yes. How many? 3. Did you sign an NDA? Yes. Did you see anything concerning? I did. Would you describe it to the court? No, I can't. Why not? He looked to the judge. Because if I do, I'll never work again. Silence. The truth didn't need adjectives. It just needed to stand there. The judge acknowledged the answer, but it was clear the fear Monique had described wasn't paranoia. It was policy. Later that day, a sealed document was entered into the record. Its contents weren't revealed to the press, but what leaked was enough internal memos from multiple production companies outlining risk assessments tied to employees with potential testimony value. The memos included lists of names. Monique's was there, Cassie's. 3 others were redacted. The term used containment priority. Back in court, Diddy's legal team looked cornered. They couldn't discredit a network of emails. They couldn't scrub metadata, and they couldn't erase Monique. The defense shifted again. They leaned on legacy, charity, economic impact. How many jobs Diddy had created, how much he'd donated, how long he'd been a cultural icon. But the jury didn't flinch, because it was no longer a character debate. It was about cost, about silence, about who pays. Monique watched from the gallery now, no longer on the stand. Just a presence, but everyone still looked her way, even the judge. The next morning, the courtroom received a sealed package, inside a hard drive, and with it a note. You're not just hearing from her anymore. Outside the courthouse, the mood had shifted. News anchors fumbled between legal analysis and cultural commentary. Panels of pundits debated whether Monique had overstepped or finally said what others couldn't. But the consensus was clear: something real had cracked. Industry voices began to weigh in. Some subtly, others definitely. An anonymous showrunner posted, I worked with Monique in 2011. Not difficult, just wouldn't lie. A veteran costume designer tweeted, there is a list, trust me. It doesn't need ink. Even a few mid-tier actors cautiously echoed support, each tweet a crack in the dam. But behind the scenes, panic. Talent agencies quietly combed through old NDAs. Legal teams prepared crisis playbooks. Studios placed internal calls. No one wanted to be next. In court, Diddy's defense team recalibrated. Their strategy had shifted from rebuttal to survival. They called a witness of their own, a former entertainment executive, calm, composed, well-dressed. What can you tell us about Ms. Monique? The witness hesitated. She was uncompromising, intense, not easy to manage. Is that unusual in the industry? A pause. No. But she didn't make people feel safe. She asked too many questions. And is that a problem? The executive adjusted his tie. It is if your job is to keep the machine running. Unintentionally, he had said the quiet part out loud. The prosecution leaned into that. You mentioned the machine. What is that? The witness sighed. It's how the industry protects its own, protects revenue, protects image. sometimes at the cost of individuals. It's not personal, it's structural. The words hung heavy. Then came a crucial pivot. The prosecution introduced flight logs, guest lists, a sequence of names, executives, actors, influencers, linked to events described by previous witnesses. One list included Monique, one did not. But in both, the names of the untouchables floated near the top. "Did you ever attend an event hosted by Mr. Combs?" the prosecution asked the executive. He looked down. "Yes." "How many?" "3. "Did you sign an NDA?" "Yes." "Did you see anything concerning?" "I did." "Would you describe it to the court?" "No." "I can't." "Why not?" He looked to the judge. "Because if I do, I'll never work again." Silence. The truth didn't need adjectives. It just needed to stand there. The judge acknowledged the answer, but it was clear the fear Monique had described wasn't paranoia, it was policy. Later that day, a sealed document was entered into the record. Its contents weren't revealed to the press. But what leaked was enough internal memos from multiple production companies, outlining risk assessments tied to employees with potential testimony value. The memos included lists of names. Monique's was there, Cassie's. 3 others were redacted. The term used containment priority. Back in court, Diddy's legal team looked cornered. They couldn't discredit a network of emails, they couldn't scrub metadata, and they couldn't erase Monique. The defense shifted again. They leaned on legacy, charity, economic impact, how many jobs Diddy had created, how much he'd donated, how long he'd been a cultural icon. But the jury didn't flinch, because it was no longer a character debate. It was about cost, about silence, about who pays. Monique watched from the gallery now, no longer on the stand, just a presence, but everyone still looked her way, even the judge. The next morning, the courtroom received a sealed package. Inside, a hard drive, and with it a note. "You're not just hearing from her anymore." The hard drive was introduced under sealed chain of custody protocols. Its contents weren't discussed in open court right away, but within hours the impact began to show. 3 more witnesses were subpoenaed. The first was a technician, formerly contracted by a private security firm that managed celebrity event logistics. He testified that in 2014 and 2016 he worked at 2 parties linked to Diddy. "I was responsible for AV infrastructure, surveillance of the property." "No," he clarified, "of the guests at entry, in designated rooms, recordings triggered by movement." The courtroom paused. Did the guests know they were being recorded? Not unless they signed the NDA. And if they didn't, the technician glanced at the judge, then they were recorded anyway. He was dismissed after confirming he had provided a drive containing sample footage metadata, not the footage itself. The next witness was a studio assistant turned whistleblower. "We managed optics, that was our job. Clean up stories before they hit. Feed exclusive photos to distract gossip sites. Redirect public attention." "How often did that involve Monique?" "For a full year." "What were you told about her?" "That she was dangerous, not because she did anything wrong, but because she wouldn't shut up." The prosecution followed with screenshots of Slack messages detailing strategy meetings to frame Monique's refusal to attend an awards campaign as diva behavior. The defense argued irrelevance. The judge disagreed. Then came the most haunting testimony yet. A behavioral psychologist retained by the court offered context. Systemic silencing is not sustained by one individual. It requires compliant collaborators, passive protectors, institutionalized amnesia. Do you believe Ms. Monique's claims fit that pattern? Yes. Why? Because her removal from professional opportunities was not immediate. It was gradual, coordinated, and targeted to erase not just her presence but her credibility. The court fell quiet again. Even Diddy's lawyers seemed rattled now. Their notes are more frantic, their sidebar requests are more frequent. But no delay could stem what was coming. The judge ordered an expedited review of the hard drive contents. A special counsel was assigned, and the court recessed early. Outside the rain had stopped, but inside the storm was just beginning. The court resumed on a Monday that felt unlike any other. Metal detectors beeped more often. Marshals spoke less. Inside the gallery filled with fresh faces, press advocates, and silent celebrities, now watching history instead of controlling it. The special counsel confirmed what had been suspected. The hard drive was real, the footage authentic, the implications vast. To preserve due process, only excerpts were reviewed in a sealed session. What the jury saw was never released to the public, but what followed made everything clear. The final witness was someone no one expected, a former A-list actor who had vanished from screens nearly a decade ago. They entered quietly, face thinner, voice lower. "I was at one of the parties," they said. When the prosecutor asked, 2013, Studio City, invited through an agent, told it was career adjacent. "Did you sign anything?" "Yes, but I kept a copy." The court reviewed the NDA. Buried in it was a clause that contradicted California privacy law. The judge acknowledged it. "What did you see?" The actor paused. People being escorted to rooms. Some were crying. Phones locked in safes. "I saw someone I admired change, and I left. I never worked again." "Did you ever tell anyone?" They looked toward Monique. "No, because they told me she was a cautionary tale." The gallery exhaled all at once. "Who told you that?" "My manager, my agent, a studio executive," they continued. "They said Monique asked too many questions, that she didn't play along, and now she was radioactive." That's what they called her, radioactive. The term stuck. The defense, visibly unraveling, attempted one last counter. They leaned on ambiguity, memory gaps, the limits of recall. But the prosecution didn't need more spectacle. They had structure. They had silence, weaponized and mapped. In closing arguments, they said, "This isn't just about what Diddy did. It's about what he was allowed to do, by people who stayed quiet, by systems built to keep secrets safer than people." The defense argued legacy again. He built a business, an empire, a culture. But the jury looked past the resume, because legacies aren't always left. Sometimes they're dismantled. The verdict came faster than anyone expected. The charges varied in weight. Some were still pending. But one ruling was unanimous. The industry had enabled it. Outside, when reporters tried to corner Monique, she said only this: "I didn't win anything. I just refused to lose quietly." As she walked to her car, people clapped, not loudly but respectfully. The kind of applause you save for someone who didn't perform, but endured. In the days that followed, more voices emerged. A director here, a choreographer there. One by one, the silence cracked. The list, once invisible, became undeniable. Studios opened internal reviews. NDAs were challenged. A production executive stepped down. But Monique She disappeared again. No press tour, no book deal, no victory lap. She had done what no one else could, walked into the room they said she'd never be allowed back in, and made them hear her. The courtroom wasn't her stage, it was her reclamation. And this time no one could edit her out.